Good afternoon, everyone. Lovely to be here. I'm Robbie Warwick. As Donna's just introduced, I work for Accenture Song, which is the creative, digital, and transformation arm of global tech firm Accenture, where we help organizations to create amazing digital experiences that work for users. It's great to be here today in my hometown. Just to introduce the session today, I live with ADHD, and I've seen firsthand how cluttered interfaces can really hinder a good experience. And my sister-in-law, Beth O'Brien, is severely visually impaired and recently published her novel Wolf Siren, where her lead character, her protagonist, shares the same visual impairment as she does. And for me, it reinforced, the importance to think about inclusion and accessibility into digital platforms, because in that short book, I was able to see through her eyes, through the words of her character, the sort of struggles she has daily in interacting with the world. So for me, accessibility is deeply personal, and that, solving those disability problems is not just the right thing to do, it's good business practice. Accenture's research shows that organizations who show disability-inclusive behaviors deliver 2.6 times the net income of their peers and double the economic profit. So it's not just the right thing to do, it is good business too. So today's session is about the why and how of inclusive design, the stories, the lessons, and the practical tips. Let's introduce our panel. We're going to kick off, I think, with some lightning intros. Should we maybe start at the end? In the sort of style of Cilla Black. What's your name? Where are you from? And sort of, maybe in one line, what fuels your passion for accessibility and inclusion?
Not who am I looking for today. Hello, my name's Catrina Baker-Bassett. I'm the managing director of DabApps. We're a Brighton-based software agency. We predominantly work with sustainability, climate tech, education, healthcare. And I guess I am passionate about accessible design and also just kind of, accessibility and equity more generally. I first came to that professionally when I worked for a company that provided interpreters for people who are deaf and hard of hearing, and I started to learn about that, and even the importance for an interpreter wearing plain clothing so that when they're signing, it's much easier to see what their hands are doing. And I'm really passionate about building cultures that mean that everybody on the team has their voice heard.
Hello, everybody. My name's Louise Bloom. I am a UX consultant. I've been doing this for about 25 years. So I've worked with some very, very big companies and all over the world. And accessibility has always been part of my remit. I also train accessibility for some big public sector commercial clients and various other things in my work at Bunnyfoot. So I work for a company called Bunnyfoot, which are now Gain. So we've been taken over. I'm also a clinical neurological physiotherapist, so I did that second, and that is very much part of the work that I do, in trying to sort of, as you were saying, like represent the experiences, the day-to-day experiences of people with digital technologies and the kind of things that would go unseen if we didn't actually reach into those communities and those individuals and take a look at what's going on there. So that's who I am.
I am William. I'm the head of accessibility at an employee-owned software testing company called Zoonou. My accessibility journey has been a kind of interesting one where it's something that I began taking interest in around kind of 9 years ago or so. And it's just something that I've become more and more passionate about and sometimes more and more exhausted by in certain areas, because you find you're constantly having some of the same regular battles and same conversations to try and get people to empathise with why accessibility is so important. And that's one of the reasons why I think sessions like this are so key.
Yes, I am Matt Roberts. I am a UX designer at a charity called Sightsavers, who are eye health disability rights charity across Africa and Asia. The reason I am passionate about inclusive design, it comes down to such a simple thing, and it's like I care about people feeling included. So there are so many barriers and frustrations and pain points of experience everyday things. I just care about making sure people don't feel excluded and can be part of the world around us.
Great intros. Thanks, everyone. And you can really pick up the passion that drives these things. This is a mission-led passion, isn't it? This is not for the sake of it. Let's dive a little deeper into some of your journeys. I think, Catrina, if we start with you, what brought you into accessibility and this sort of domain of inclusive design?
Yeah, so as I mentioned during that intro, I guess my first kind of professional exposure was working for a company that provided interpreters for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. I started to learn British Sign Language whilst I was with them, and I also went to an event where I was the only hearing person. So I spent the whole evening. I was not, by that point, fluent in BSL, and I spent the whole evening not being able to communicate effectively, essentially. So actually being on the other side of that, I've spent my entire life being very privileged as far as all of that kind of accessibility and the world being set out for somebody like me goes. So to be on the other side of that was really eye-opening. And then, so that wasn't anything to do with tech, and I suppose that, but it's kind of stayed with me throughout my career. And now, as I kind of am in the role of managing director at a tech company, not only is it really important to our clients and the users of their products, and for us to kind of advocate for accessible design and products, because there will often be pushback because of misconceptions, and we'll come on to that later. But it's really important to advocate within our team as well. So we have lots of people in our company who are neurodiverse, and so we have to figure out ways for them to feel comfortable flagging things that they might be struggling with and supporting them. And that's really, really important. Outside of work, I also have a mum who's had Parkinson's for over 20 years, so I have seen very much what, physical limitations kind of how that impacts somebody and their ability to just participate in the world. And I feel like this is a bit of a counselling session. Sorry. And my wife also has a chronic illness, which meant that she got limited mobility with her shoulders. And that sounds like not a really big deal, but honestly, for really a 6-foot lesbian who her whole life had been like really into DIY and stuff, going to a point where she couldn't get stuff down for me from a high shelf, like that's really, really tough. And so I think hopefully those personal experiences also come through in the workplace. And although I'm not a specialist in design, I'm really passionate about making sure that the culture of the company and the clients that we work with really kind of take that on board, and we kind of have that empathy and that understanding running through our products, because that's really, really important. Empathy and understanding from the end user's perspective is absolutely what will make or not a successful product.
It really resonates. What you said there about the being the one person who couldn't participate reminds me of an old colleague of mine who she was profoundly blind and deaf, and she said, "I have the impairment. Society gives me the disability," and you got to experience that from the other side. I think it's a really powerful message. Matt, what was the sort of pivotal moment for you that shifted your focus onto accessibility and web accessibility?
Cool. So there was two things for me, both personal. And it was a arthritis diagnosis when I was 24 that threw me on a complete curveball, very unexpected, quite into my running and things like that. And one day my hands and feet started to swell up to the point that I couldn't pick up a pen or walk without a walking stick. Quite a surprise for a 24-year-old. And there were days where trying to do everyday activities like use my phone was then quite a task. It not only affected me physically, but mentally and emotionally as well as a 24-year-old, looking at arthritis support, and it's all geared towards 70-plus people. So that made me kind of, as that initial introduction to, I didn't think that something like that would impact me, particularly because I'm into running and things. but then later on, I started to talk about being colourblind and colourblind designer. And what that led on to was the fact that people were listening and interested and started to introduce me to words of accessibility and inclusive design. And I come from a design background, brand and agencies, illustration, animations, rebrands, all that kind of stuff, where if it looked good, that hit the brief, which is one way. As soon as I started to feel that I had a voice, there were so many others out there that also had a voice, and it was listening and sharing my experiences that kind of impacted and improved services that I was using, design projects that I was working on, but also that level of advocacy and that environment where sharing stories, personal experiences, however big or small they are, they do mean a lot, and that's a huge pivotal moment a few years ago now.
Really interesting, and interesting that it's difficult to get across, I suppose, when something's not immediately obvious, especially around colourblindness. I remember, I think they're called, I'll find out the name of them later. They're based over in Brighton, and one of the ladies there said, instead of doing like red and green lanyards, why don't you do a stripy one and not stripy one for that same reason? Because it doesn't always come up, right? William, I think we're going across to why is accessibility so crucial to digital experience?
I think one of the key things that I find around accessibility that makes it so important to digital experience, it's around considering people's needs, and it takes a step further than this as well, is that often when I find I'm talking to people about accessibility, I'm often talking to people that are interested in terms of compliance. Am I meeting specific guidelines, or am I meeting specific legal requirements? But if we then look at it from the view of inclusive design, it takes a step beyond that, because when you're considering inclusive design, you're not just considering accessibility, you're considering gender, life experiences, you're considering what people's language may be and things like that. So I think it's really important to consider things from that perspective. So if you take, for instance, say you've developed a voice assistant or something like that, maybe you've considered how well it works for if someone has a strong accent, but maybe you've not considered how well does it work if someone has a stutter, or how well does it work if someone phrases things in a different way because English isn't their first language. So inclusive design is really critical in encompassing all of these different aspects. And the other thing that is key within this is that everyone on here, on this panel, is probably somewhat involved within the digital creation experience, creation of a digital platform, and probably everyone watching this has kind of had some experience in that as well. We aren't the users. We know a little bit too much about how the platform's made. We know a little bit too much about what the journeys are through the platform to get from A to B. We need to be using or kind of engaging real users that give us the feedback on what challenges actually exist for them. And that really helps drive inclusive design and accessibility, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't help thinking about, as you move towards sort of agentic AI and those sort of homogenization of processes, how do you include the diversity of, things like stutters, and, how do you build systems that account for those things? You make a great point. Louise, a project or personal experience that shaped your take on accessibility?
So, as I said, I've been, sort of aligned with accessibility for my whole career. A lot of the time it was a case of just companies making sure they were compliant, evaluating abstractly against things like WCAG, is the color contrast right? Is this target the thing right? But I was always aware of the fact that the people that I wasn't representing the community, that I wasn't talking to people who were representing people with those levels of impairment. And you've heard, how personal it becomes the moment that you start to touch something and it's not built for you. And then becoming a physiotherapist, as I say, put me in contact with day-to-day, experiences of people, and really opened the door to the level of impact we can have. And that's positive or negative. So one of my favourite stories is a client that I worked with in a nursing home. And he has locked-in syndrome. And I work with a couple of people. And if you don't know, locked-in syndrome is when you can only move your eyes. So the brain is fully functioning, the sensory networks are fully functioning, but your mobility is limited to eye movements. And this client was wonderfully able to, browse online, shop on Amazon, place outrageous bets on racehorses, and just continue living, and also to communicate by using an eye tracking device and well-coded websites. And, since then, I have had the opportunity with Bunnyfoot to just have usability testing sessions, and I'll call them usability testing sessions, with people with impairments of various kinds, whether it's cognitive, fatigue, sensory, visual impairment, deaf people, and just their personal experiences are enough motivation to keep me in the game. And a lot of the time, I think one of the things that's also helping me, sorry if I'm running over, is the ability to train others. So I have been around for a long time, since websites were very, very simple. And I think it can be quite overwhelming to enter the accessibility space. We have a wider vocabulary of people with impairments, and technology, as you said, is becoming much more diverse as well. And I think what I get to do is reassure people that actually you don't need to try and solve everything for everyone. People have their own methods and their own techniques. A lot of the time, digital accessibility is about getting out of their way. So that was me.
Amazing. Thank you. Good. Those are some great insights. And I got completely absorbed by the stories and forgot where we're going to next. I think we are switching across to tips and strategies, things you've picked up over the years. What I was thinking about whilst you were talking was Phil Fumey, who was here last year, the year before, and he was talking about the use of AI with his dad who had dementia, but also had these really amazing stories about, I think he led a revolution or something, and I'm not overstating that. It's making my hair stand on end, just the story. And he'd set his dad up with Copilot, to start capturing his stories to be retold later. And he was taking audio recordings and compiling those through Copilot so he could go back and learn more about his dad, because he couldn't always tell the stories in the moment. He was catching up a little bit later. And I just thought this was so amazing that, even that late on in life when, they're planning for whatever comes next, using technology for those amazingly inclusive reasons. Let's not talk about my ramblings. We're going to jump into tips and strategies, the important, most important bit alongside the why, but the how. Catrina, there's loads of misconceptions around inclusive design and web accessibility. If there was one you'd like to debunk, what would it be?
Can I have two?
You can have three.
Okay, so I think there's a couple of things. One, and this is something that we deal with because cost is always a factor in everything that we do, right, in our working life. So when a client comes to us and we are working through a discovery phase with them and figuring out, what this product is going to do and why and who the users are going to be, there's always going to be a question of how much is it going to cost. And if you chuck in the word accessibility, I think the kind of misconception is that that means they have to pay a load more money. That just isn't, and also shouldn't be true. So if you're if culturally and kind of, I guess, sort of philosophically within your organization, you are making sure that you're kind of asking the questions about who is going to be using this product, why, and really thinking about making sure that no one's kind of, I guess, left out of that experience, then you can have those conversations really early and importantly kind of raise the awareness with your clients really early as well, and make it feel like less of a, it shouldn't be like this separate thing that we're thinking about. It should be part of that process. And and it should be part of whatever it is we're designing and building with those end users in mind. And the other thing that I suppose is kind of in my thread, because I'm not technical, I'm not a UX designer, very much a generalist, is that this isn't just something that we think about as far as the digital products go. It is something that we think about as far as our organisation goes. It's something that I think about as being a leader. So I want my team to feel like they have, whatever support they need in place, in the same way that I would want myself, my mum, my wife to have that too. And I think you have to, I think it's really important to build that into the culture of your organisation, and not just pay it lip service. People are really important. It's the hardest bit of leading a team, is making sure that all of your humans are okay. So yeah.
There's one of those disabled user, do you mean user? That kind of, I think you said that on Monday when we had a quick chat. What would have been the cost of excluding Stephen Hawking, Matt, we didn't plan this exact order, did we? Sorry to keep chucking the mics around. How do you persuade others with alternate priorities like, cost or delivery pace to prioritize those accessibility requirements?
Great question. I think it's about starting small. So things around cost, time, speed, all that kind of thing are such familiar terms with any product lifestyle. For years and years, it's the way we've always done it. We understand what we need to spend to how much we're going to get back. So accessibility and inclusive design are going to be new, and they're going to be new terms, and you fear what you don't understand. I think Batman, someone said at some point. So it is really about introducing the smallest thing, and the smallest thing can be around making the button slightly larger. And it doesn't have to be expensive, but it's just about understanding that there are so many small frustrations out there, small barriers, that if you start to build a culture where you can feel that you can share your personal experience and say, tell me about the last time you did this. As well, I never did it because I couldn't see the screen, or it never worked on mobile, or it never worked with my technology, or my mouse died and I had to use the keyboard to navigate this website and I couldn't tab around it. It's those little things that kind of go, oh yeah, I get that frustration, so you can start to weave it into the conversations that you're having with your projects. And it's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to suddenly have an entire accessibility process embedded on day one. But if you start small, people will start to get excited. Start a champions network. Start by sharing an article. Share this talk. It'd be lovely. Start talking to people, and don't be afraid to get things wrong. Like we're bound to get things wrong, but you don't know until you ask. But don't start because you don't understand. So just start. Like I say, start really small, start being open about sharing your frustrations, and then see where you go, because it's an incredible way when you get there. Show them. It's amazing, yeah. I think telling that story is, there was a lady called Joanne who I used to work with. She was the deaf and blind one, and she told these most amazing stories that really captured you. And one day, I don't know if she was telling me the story, if she was threatening me, but she said, remember, Robbie, we're all one accident away from being disabled. And I was like, it really hit me, because I was like, if I wasn't doing it for you, and it wasn't because of the business benefit, actually, I'm just playing the long game here, balancing risk, because if I end up not being able to see, I want services to have been designed for me. So there's a selfish aspect to it as well, if that's your thing. And it's a good reminder, actually, just to add to that, there's 16 million people with a disability in the UK. So when you think about, it's just a us and them type thing, it's so outdated, and it's really useful. If numbers are required to persuade the certain person, there are big numbers out there that can really help pitch the importance of accessibility. Absolutely. Where are we moving on to next? I think we're going to Louise. We're going to talk a bit about bringing to life what good might look like from an accessibility perspective.
So the golden rule, and to build on everything everybody's said about just get started, you don't need to worry about getting it wrong, you don't need loads of money, is just to keep things simple. So the golden rule is do less. So if your content is limited, that's going to help a load of people. If you use plain language, images that are clear and decipherable and well described, those things will make an enormous difference to a huge amount of people. And to your point about how many people, so one of my favourite clients, some of my favourite accessibility clients are the names you would not expect. So Estee Lauder, for example, invest heavily in accessibility. And when we're training, we always say, like, basically a quarter of the UK population have a permanent disability. And that's not counting everyone who's just out in sunlight or their arm got hurt. So it is well worth doing. So do less. In terms of content, have less content, write it in plain English. In terms of design, keep it clear, keep it simple, make sure there's plenty of space, keep use of colours, movements, all of those kind of things, take them all out. And in terms of development, make sure that your code is clean, it's well structured, use HTML properly and semantically, split out your visual display. And all of those things are simple things you can do, and they will have an enormous impact on a really diverse group of users at the other end. So that's my top tip.
Keep it simple.
I was going to say, I will actually share on LinkedIn after this as well a list of things that we say, like, you can do this yourself to evaluate the accessibility of anything you're building or involved in. So I'll pop that on LinkedIn after this.
Amazing, thank you. And a little takeaway for you for some homework. We got about 5 minutes left, so we'll go to William, and then we'll probably jump to, since we broke Slido, we have to do that anyway. We'll have to jump to the final bit. So, William, just before we jump through to the end, what sort of things can we do to track the accessibility of things that you're building?
So, I guess this kind of ties into a lot of what Louise has already been saying, is that consider accessibility very much from the starting point of your development process. That's right from the design stage. Look at how you're implementing colours and layouts to ensure that there isn't anything that can be misinterpreted if it relies on colour, or the information is clear to users. Then when you're getting into development stages where you're actually building things, start testing using keyboards, start testing are you able to navigate things using screen readers? Things like this are free and easy to access for most people. You can get hold of NVDA, which is a screen reader for Windows, which is completely free. If you've got a Mac or iOS device, you can use VoiceOver, and these are tools that are installed onto your devices already, so you don't have to pay for them. So get familiar with some of the tools that people might be using in order to support themselves. But then also, as I mentioned earlier, just engage real users, speak to people, have those conversations, start to understand where they might see barriers in what you're creating, or if you're able to give them hi-fi designs, or if you're able to give them access to the platforms that you're building, get them to actually give you feedback on those live things, and take it on board and develop on it, iterate each time on what that feedback is.
Amazing, thank you. There's so much to take away, and I want to make sure that everyone here in the room has one thing to take away with them. So should we go down the panel? We'll start at the end, back to me. If there is one action the audience should take away today, what should it be?
I think it's kind of what you were saying. Don't be afraid to be open and honest and ask questions of people about what they need. Also say what you need. I think it's that. It's just open communication. I think that was something that we said probably when we were having our call earlier in the week. But yeah, open communication, and think about how you would want to experience something, I suppose, in someone else's shoes.
Mine would be don't assume. So don't think that don't rely on a guideline or something. Just go and find people, talk to people, be open, listen, and don't make any assumptions about what people need, I think.
Mine's probably fairly similar as well. It's around make sure you speak to real users, understand that as creators of products that you might not be the best person to make judgments on what works for your users. and make sure you get that engagement.
Cool. Mine is everyone's got a phone here today. Go and have a look at the accessibility settings and start to understand what accessibility can cover. Things around the size of your font, the colour, the space, there is a language, things like that. Go and have a look, and you might actually realise that you're already using accessibility features without even knowing it. So do take a look.
You're right.
There's lots in there.
Amazing. Keep it simple. Don't assume. These things are not that hard. If you think about them, speak to real users. This feels really obvious, and it doesn't feel like we should be saying these things, but we do have to. And it's easily forgotten when you're under pressure, when you're on a timeline, when you've got cost pressures. If there's something that you heard today from the panel that resonated with you, please go and post about it, because these easy messages are easy to get across to people, and they're easy to forget about. So the more we talk about it, the more it just becomes second nature. And it is good business. It is the right thing to do. We've had some really powerful points today. I think what we've heard is that accessibility and inclusion, they're not side projects. These are the foundation of good design. And I don't know if Tom Odrobinski is in the audience, but I heard from him a few years ago. He used this line, "All boats rise with the tide." And it's a great thing to remember, especially in this area. But in this area of accessibility, the better you make your platforms, the more accessible you make them, the more accessible they become. And that improves the quality of experience for everybody. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Please join me in thanking our panel, Catrina, Matt, William, and Louise, and do enjoy the rest of DigiFest. Thank you.
We have got a couple of minutes if anybody has any questions. Would anyone like to ask a question of the panel?
Just on a practical note, because I don't know a lot about AI, I don't even know what UX is. But, for example, an organisation like Citizens Advice Bureau, where they've got an online service where there's a lot of form filling for universal credit, other debt management, blah, blah, blah. How would you improve that and make it more accessible? It's very specific. Sorry,
Happy to start. In terms of accessibility, one of the factors with a form will be how it's built. So making sure that the form is really well coded, which you don't have to understand, but the people who build it, you can tell them to do it. There are ways of making forms so that with a screen reader or any other device like the eye tracking thing I mentioned, it becomes possible to hear what you're supposed to put into the field, to know what you've done, to make sure that all of the errors are also accessible. So there are ways of making sure that that's possible. Does anyone else want to? I'm looking at you, Will, because this is your world.
Yeah, I suppose to Louise's point earlier about keeping content as plain and as straightforward as possible, understanding the user in those certain situations, why are they on that particular website, understand, and you do this by talking to the users, understand what is going through their mind at any given, at those particular moments where the stress is up there, the time is so poor, so to keep the form as straightforward as possible, using language that is as familiar as possible in those scenarios is absolutely vital, and that is all, again, part of accessibility as well.
Got a mic from somewhere else. So I think the other thing that springs to mind with this, I think there's two things that springs to mind for me with this, especially in the context of forms. The first thing is letting people know what information they need for the form up front. If someone is going to have to go away and find out some information, let them know about that before they start the effort of completing the form, or if not, give them the ability to save the form in a midway through its progress so they don't have to repeat entering details into that form again. The other thing that we see a lot within public sector stuff is that, especially gov.uk, uses a specific design. It uses a consistent design throughout all the forms. One input field on one set of the form is going to be the same as an input field many pages into the form. They approach it with the idea that there will only ever be one question per page, which limits the amount of information that users need to be considering on that individual page. And they use a consistent design language throughout it as well. And by considering those things in how you're creating forms can make it much easier for people to fill out that information.
Can I add to that, actually? Sorry, just what to see. While people are talking, my brain will work. We did some wonderful testing with an individual who had ADHD, and it was fascinating to watch her use what was a payment form in that context. But it really reinforced and evidenced some of the stuff we know about forms in particular. So you've got ADHD. We know that people under stress, often their brains will respond in a very similar way to people who have got ADHD, and that is very easily overwhelmed. It's hard to break things down. And she just looked at this form and she went, "Oh, I'm not doing that." And it was I asked her to explain why, and it was as simple as the layout. Like, they had just put a form into 2 columns on a page, which meant there was too much for her to just break down and sort of process. And she just wouldn't do it. She wouldn't, in that case, it was a commercial product, so she wouldn't buy it. But like Will was saying, there's resources out there like .gov.uk where there's a lot of research has gone into how they're presenting those forms, and those things can really help people to complete tasks. So sorry, I just thought.
I'm going to add now as well. I've actually just gone through the access to work process with one of my team who has had an ADHD diagnosis in the last 6 months or so. The process is appalling. Like the form filling and what you actually need to do at each stage is desperately unclear. I'll send them my feedback. But yeah, I think all of those, it's so important to observe, particularly when it is people accessing the support that they need. There's a long way to go there as far as making those things properly accessible to those people. And I would say the first thought that my team member had when she saw it was, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. So
I might get shot down by my co-panelists for this, but IKEA it's the same standard they use for everything, right? Everything's clear, everything's minimal. But the things you don't see is the way that the site is coded means that you can skip across portions of the navigation, which is pretty normal. But even within the page, you can skip over huge bits of content. They've really put thought into which bits of the content have text alternatives so that things are, if you're listening to the site, it makes sense and it follows. So it's good in terms of the way that it's actually delivered, but the really good thing is that throughout the design process, from the beginning to the end, they are thinking about these things and using accessibility as a standard within their design. So that's why I love it.
I'm happy to expand on that if you want. I know I'm not a panelist. I was just going to quickly reflect on what you just said about gov.uk, because I think that is one of the gold standards. And I spent 15 years in government, so know that gov.uk team really well. And the thing that differentiates them from others that I've sort of seen and worked with is they really obsess over the journey of the user. So they look at the user. They don't look at the channel, the web channel or the form. They look at the user themselves and they say, how do we get the user into this process? If the user can't get into the process, maybe digital nomads, that kind of, what if you can't get online? Then how do they access the service? If they don't like typing and they prefer to speak, how do you meet them on their channel of choice? And I think if there's one common theme through organizations that I see doing this brilliantly well and hitting their WCAG 2.2s and aligning to the upcoming 3 standard, is they really, really focus relentlessly on the user experience and then building their offering around them. I think if there's one thing that I would say, always advocate to take away, is just think about that user. It takes you back to everything you said about keep it simple, everything you said about putting yourself in the shoes of the user, about asking the user questions. If you think about the user and their journey through your service, a lot of these questions start to answer themselves.